you can tell a machine learning person versus a statistics person, even though there's tons of overlap, they'll use very different language to describe the exact same thing. And it's part of our, I feel like it's our just natural tendency to try to always find ways to figure out like what your identity is. Are you a data engineer, or are you a data scientist? Or I mean, there's all these different labels for people and careers, and not a lot of like effort being put into being like, but they're all saying the same thing, or it's just twists, very subtle differences rather than entirely different things.
This episode of Kent's Nearest Neighbors is powered by Z by HP, HP's high compute, workstation grade line of products and solutions. Today, I had the pleasure of interviewing Josh Starmer. He is a return guest on the podcast, and a lot's changed since the last time he was here. So since the last time Josh was on the podcast, he's actually published a book, the Statquest Illustrated Guide to Machine Learning. And today we're going to talk a little bit about what that experience was like. He also came on the Bright Data trip, at the Bright Data house, and I'd love to hear his experience there, meeting with all these other creators, and just what that was like in general. So Josh, thank you so much again for coming in and having this little chat with me.
Hooray! It's good to be here.
Amazing. Well, I was so excited to see you in North Carolina.
Oh yeah.
Last time, for those who don't know, on my last trip around the United States, maybe, what was that, almost 3 months ago?
Yeah.
Josh had me over to his house. He cooked me a wonderful steak dinner. So for those who don't know, Josh is also, aside from being an incredible musician, a incredibly insightful, studious statistician, but also an incredible cook. So,
aw, thanks.
I know I'm going to make you turn red so many times during this. I'm interested. What got you interested just in cooking? I mean, it's a little bit different, but
I mean, I love food. I've loved eating ever since I was a little kid. I've always loved eating. And when I started cooking my own meals probably when I was 6. My mom got me a little tiny frying pan and a little spatula. I had all this little stuff, and I would cook myself breakfasts and lunches. So I've just been cooking my whole life.
Wow, that's amazing. So something I know that I personally really enjoyed was the rolls you made.
Yeah.
Is there any? They're actually, I would have to say, probably my favorite home cooked rolls I've had in my entire life. But are there any things that you really enjoy cooking the most? Is there something you consider yourself specializing in?
Well, I love baking. I love anything with yeast. So those rolls are part of my favorite things that I make. Yeast is sort of magical, right? You mix it with flour and water and some salt, and the yeast literally takes on a life of its own and sort of lives in the dough, and it grows. And I don't know, it's just magic every time I do it, and it's never grown old. And this is also one of those things that when I was a kid, my dad baked. He baked bread, and I just loved his bread, and always just wanted to make his bread. And so I guess it's one of those like multi-generational things as well.
That's really cool. Yeast has been very interesting for me for other reasons. So for those who don't know, and I'm obviously not the expert here, I think Josh knows significantly more about this than I do, but everything that you put into whatever you're using yeast in, whether it's bread or a pizza dough or whatever it might be, everything impacts the yeast. So salt, in some sense, retards the growth of the yeast. Temperature is very relevant, and time is also very relevant. So you have to pay attention to all these different factors. We might call them different features for baking.
That's right.
And that sort of dynamic problem is really fun, and there's definitely an art to getting it right based on the climate, or even the altitude, I would imagine, had some impact on things.
Yeah,
there.
definitely.
It'd be fun to do a little algorithm associated with that.
Bread rises higher at high altitude because there's less atmospheric pressure holding it down, and it's actually a problem for a lot of recipes that are based on the volume of the dough. In that you'll get a recipe for bread that says wait until the dough has doubled in size. Well, at high altitude it can do that too fast. and so you have to kind of know that like that you actually, because time is also an important factor, you've got to like punch the dough down or deflate it and let it grow some longer to develop the flavor and the gluten so it doesn't just turn into a brick in the oven.
Interesting. Yeah. I will definitely have to get the roll recipe for Hawaiian temperatures.
Yeah.
Because the humidity, it's not 70 degrees inside. It's like 80 degrees inside and those types of things.
So fairly close to my North Carolina situation as well. Maybe my next book will be the Statquest Illustrated Guide to Baking.
Please. I would be the first to pick it up 100%. Right. Incredible. Well, you mentioned the book. I'm really interested in the story behind that. So, perhaps let's get an origin story. Like, how did you get started with that? What was the inspiration for wanting to write a book?
I never wanted to write a book ever. I thought, look how thick this is. It's 305 pages long. Writing that many pages is something that just seemed like the worst thing I could possibly do to myself. And so I never ever wanted to write a book. But fans on my YouTube channel kept requesting a book, and I was like, I do videos. Why should I do a book? I didn't really understand what the advantages are like. Anyways, so gradually over time, I discovered that different people learn different ways. Some people learn effectively from the videos. Some people learn more effectively from books. And I think that was something that was kind of slow for me to realize because that's what I did. I made videos, and I was like, clearly this is the best way to communicate. But some people really are better with the book. And the other thing that's nice about the book that I didn't realize until I started writing it is when I make my videos, in order to keep them from being 4 hours long each, I try to keep them real focused on the specific topic at hand. And in a book, you can actually look at more big picture things. And you can show links between different topics and how they're related, and I could do a lot more in the book than I can in, say, a 15-minute video. So that was a really cool thing. Another thing that was nice about the book is over the past 6 or 8 years I've been making Statquest videos, I know what the frequently asked questions are for each of these topics. And in the book, I could include all those sort of lessons learned from things that maybe I could have done a better job explaining in the videos, or just things that just are questions that pop up a bunch of times when people want to learn about, say, the AUC, area under the curve. There's everyone's like, how do you calculate it? And my answer is like, you just get a computer to do it. But people actually want to know. So in the book, I've actually got a diagram of how you can break that shape down into rectangles and triangles and easily calculate the area of each shape, and then you add them together. So I was able to add things that I'd wished I'd included in the videos originally.
That's incredible. And it seems like a book in this sense, like you described, it sort of ties everything together. It lets you look back at the body of work that you've done and say, okay, these are the meta concepts. This is the story that weaves through all of them. I know, at least with a lot of my videos, it's like just like snapshots of different parts. And if you're talking about specific algorithms, or you're talking about specific statistics concepts, it's not this like beginning to end that you might have in a classroom setting.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think that's something not that was missing from the work that you do, but something that really is additive for a different type of user. We've talked before, and your views go way up during midterms and during finals.
That's exactly right.
When students are searching for specific topics,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And I love that this is something that I've gone through about half now, where it's like, oh, I can start like learning from like these like benchmarks or these signposts and pick it up from there, rather than just picking from the search and those types of things. So it's a very, very meaningful and a different look at teaching, which I really enjoy. Hooray. From your perspective.
Hooray.
Was there anything that really surprised you when you were writing the book, or something that you didn't expect?
I, well, like I mentioned earlier, I didn't expect I would actually write it. Um, yeah, that was a big shock. What happened though is when I first quit my full time job in a research laboratory to do YouTube full time, I really I wasn't making hardly any money at all. I did the math, and I was making less than someone who bags groceries, and I really wasn't making enough money to make ends meet. And I tried various things, like I tried doing consulting and I tried doing a bunch of other random stuff, but what they ended up doing is actually getting in the way of me working on my videos. And the whole point of quitting my full time job was to spend more time doing Statquest. And so I had to figure out another way to get kind of a supplementary income to make ends meet that wasn't consulting and was still kind of focused on Statquest. And so what I did is I made these PDF study guides for some of my videos, about 6 of my videos, where I just in a PDF document I kind of put all the main ideas and the main concepts, and if there were any like equations that were important, I put them in this study guide. And so I started selling these study guides, and as a result of creating those study guides, I saw how I could make my book, and um, and what I realized is I didn't have to write a book. That instead of writing it, I could draw it, because I don't really think very well in words, but I am able to think in terms of images and pictures
And songs.
So, yeah, and songs and silly songs. And so once I realized that I could draw my book, and that was the process I went through with the study guides. Once I realized I could draw it, all of a sudden I was like, oh, I can actually do it. So that was like a big, I mean, maybe it wasn't a surprise while I was writing the book, but it was a big surprise in terms of my life. In terms of like, I went from being someone who was dead certain I would never ever be able to write a book because I'm not fantastic with words and describing things with words. To someone who was like, oh, I can write books. And now I'm just like in love with writing books, and all I want to do is write books. The process is, I mean, I love making videos, don't get me wrong. And so, and one is silver and the other's gold. But right now I'm just like, oh, the process is fun. And the end product, I've never, just holding it in my hands, I'm like, ooh, this is a book.
Yeah,
It's special.
This episode is brought to you by Z by HP, HP's high compute, workstation grade line of products and solutions. Z is specifically made for high performance data science solutions, and I personally use the ZBook Studio and the Z4 workstation. I really love that Z workstations can come standard with Linux, and they can be configured with the data science software stack. With the software stack, you can get right to work doing data science on day one without the overhead of having to completely reconfigure your new machine. Now back to our show. There's something really incredible. I mean, the book is, from my perspective, quite beautiful.
Right.
I think that there's something really fun about your approach to learning in general, right? From our discussions, you found a way to make all of these concepts fun to you,
Mm-hmm.
and in different ways. The videos, it's with songs, it's with funny puns and jokes and sound effects, and with the book, it's with a lot of similar sound effects.
Yeah.
But you're reading in your head. It's it's drawings, it's action like that.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, from your perspective, obviously aside from reading the book and watching your videos, how can people take maybe a lighter approach or a more fun approach to learning some of these technical concepts?
Yeah, that's a good question. How to lighten the mood. I mean, I guess the thing is, oh, I don't know. I mean, I genuinely think that statistics and machine, I think it's fun. And it isn't just a bunch of equations. It's actually doing cool stuff. And if you think of it in terms of doing cool stuff and not just in terms of like fancy, complicated, scary-looking mathematics, maybe it becomes more fun when you think about what you're doing with it and what the goal is with it. And maybe it's just a matter of having a bigger picture and not getting lost in the Greek symbols that they put in all those equations. Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I think breaking complex things down into simple, concrete examples is something you do unbelievably well, and just cutting through a lot of the noise, cutting through a lot of the jargon. I know I when I was studying any form of math, when I was studying any form of more technical concepts, I just remember having to write a glossary for myself
Yeah,
where
right.
and I'd
Yeah.
say like 50% of the time
Yeah,
it was focused on learning the lexicon,
that's right.
and then the other half is spent actually implementing and learning the meat of the concepts. And if we think about it that way, that's fundamentally flawed,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
If we could shift that ratio just a little bit.
Yeah,
And I've always liked how you've used, songs, fun analogies, whatever it might be, to break through a lot of the jargon, or call it out, or sort of in some sense make fun of the jargon,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, I think a lot of it is silly, right? And a lot of it is, I don't know. It's just I feel like yeah, it's just a big pile of jargon, and a lot of it is. I feel like the jargon is actually designed to intimidate people rather than sort of welcome them in. It's they're there to like for example, the concept of a confusion matrix is something that I've been working
Confusing.
on. It's right. Like I just feel like that name is inherently designed to confuse people, right? Why don't you just call it like true and false positive table, or I don't know, there could just be like other names for it that would be more direct and more to the point. One of my you got me on a roll here. One of my biggest pet peeves in all of statistics right now forever has been this thing called a type 1 versus type 2 error. And like, who comes up with that name? Why don't you call it false positives versus false negatives? Because that's what they are. They're not like, I mean, sure, there are two types of errors you could make, but one, the number one, gives you no information about what kind of error that is, and the number two doesn't either. So it's like someone came up with this terminology, which is like pervasive in all statistics, just to rain on my parade and make it harder for, because I can never remember that stuff. And so, I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's one of those things where I've seen it so many times over the years, but I mean, probably it took me about 10 years before I could remember the difference between a type 1 and type 2 error. And if someone had just said false positive, false negative from the get-go, I would have never had any of that problem.
Yeah, I think that that's also perpetuated with, we have statistics, we have data science, we have machine learning, we have, uh, you know, an evolution of the career path where we just call things different things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, features in machine learning are the exact same as independent variables,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, do we really need another name? I think features
Yeah.
is probably a better name than independent variables,
Yeah.
but they're both used, right? And it's like, some people within the domain call them one thing, some people within the domain calling another thing, and it just does get really confusing when there's so many different names for a lot of the same things. Is there something you think we can do as like as a group, as people learning statistics or domain, that can help limit those, or sort of press for a better future? Or is it just about creating fun videos and creating like a more conversation around why that's a problem?
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like I think as humans we like to make things more complicated than they are, and I think there is something very very natural to like to that tendency, either for like I think it's baked into our evolution to try to separate one group of people from another group of people. We use language to do that, and we use it within the field, right? Like you can tell a machine learning person versus a statistics person, even though there's tons of overlap, they'll use very different language to describe the exact same thing, and it's part of our. I feel like it's our just natural tendency to try to always find ways to figure out like what your identity is. Are you a data engineer, or are you a data scientist? Or you? I mean, there's all these different labels for people and careers, and not a lot of like effort being put into being like, but they're all saying the same thing, or it's just twists, very subtle differences rather than entirely different things. So I don't know. In some sense, I kind of feel like it might be helpless, because as soon as you come up with like a common lexicon or a common shared list of words that we're going to use to describe things, someone's going to come up with something else actually ends up being the same thing as like linear regression, and they're going to give it a new name, and there'll be a new field out there called like data wizards, and they're going to use this new language. The data wizards are going to be like, well, I don't know that linear regression thing you guys are doing. We call it linear line thing. And, and that's just, I think it's inevitable that weird stuff is going to happen like that.
So, it's interesting. We've talked, and you recently took an awesome new role, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
related to AI and education.
Yeah.
And that means you're working a lot more close to industry than you perhaps were in the past. Is that something that, what are some of the things that you've seen from those experiences now that are a little bit different from what you were experiencing just making videos on your own and creating the Statquest business and channel and content? I think that what we're describing right now, the lexicon and those types of things, that's like a very industry heavy thing, right? And when we're at home, we don't have to deal with it. But when you go into a new setting, people are calling things different than you've heard them before, and you're starting to get exposure to all these, like a lot more confusion comes into play.
Yeah. I mean, geez, along the lines of sort of different words and how they're used. So my background is in genetics research, but I'm now working for a company that facilitates neural network research, and when I first started working for Lightning, that was actually a big stumbling block for me, because they keep talking about research, and just in my mind, I just thought a bunch of people like doing experiments, and but not just like on a computer, but like with a, mixing chemicals and, holding vials up to the light and peering through it. And that's the kind of research I'm more familiar with. And I wasn't really familiar with like neural network research. And I didn't even know what that meant, because I just thought you create neural networks and you use neural networks. I didn't realize there was a whole like research branch in there. So it was kind of like a little confusing for me at first, just once I had, and it's one of these things in hindsight, I'm like, oh, it's obvious. But that was a language issue that I had early on with the company. But what I'm really excited about with Lightning is, when I was working doing YouTube all by myself, all alone in my little cave, I feel my fear, sort of a constant nagging fear, is that I'm going to lose perspective, and I'm going to lose sort of like a sense of what's really going on in terms of what my audience needs to get done. I can teach concepts all day and all night, but is that really going to be what they need to get their job done? Are the concepts enough? And I've always felt like the concepts weren't enough, and that's based partly on my college experience. I remember I went to college and I learned a bunch of stuff, and then I got a job and realized that everything was completely different from what I learned in college. And there was that disconnect between college and my job bothered me, because I'd worked so hard in college I wanted to get good grades, and I wanted to do well on the projects that I had, and I just, I wanted to get patted on the back all the time. So I worked really hard. But and then I started this job and realized that it wasn't that it just wasn't useful. It had nothing to do with what I was doing. And one thing I like about Lightning is it does help me stay sort of in the loop in terms of what people are actually doing. What are they doing with AI? How are they doing it? What do they want to do with it that they can't do right now? What concepts are keeping them from taking full advantage of these tools? Or that, if they understood how it worked a little bit better, would they be able to apply it better? So that's one thing I'm excited about with this company, is they kind of keep me grounded and not just completely isolated from the rest of the world. Ken, I could go on forever about this, so just stop me. But I keep talking about things I'm excided about.
No, I love it.
So another thing I'm really excited about is, this is going on for years. Ever since I started making my first video on neural networks, I wanted to have a companion series of how to actually do it, like in Python or the language of your choice. Right now, we're going to use Python, because I didn't want to just teach theory. I wanted to teach like this is how you do it. And part of the reason why I wanted to teach this is how you do it is I'd never done it before. And I felt kind of guilty that I was teaching people the theory and be like, well, that's the theory, but I don't actually know how to do it, in person. That was embarrassing to me. So I was like, I really want to have a series of videos where it's hands-on because that's how I'm going to learn it myself. And that's another cool thing that Lightning is helping me with. They've got some of the best PyTorch neural network programmers in the world working for them. And they're teaching me so that I can teach through my videos. I can teach everybody else. And I just love it. They're super patient with me, and they answer all my little nitpicky, silly questions. And I'm super excited about building this series of not just theory, but also applied neural networks. And with the hope that this series on neural networks is actually something that people could then do at their work, and it wouldn't just be something that they learned that was completely abstract and not useful at all.
That's incredible. I mean, it seems like a really good fit, especially for your interest in the actual implementation process. Something I'm interested in also is, how have you found it working with people versus when you were exclusively working by yourself?
Yeah.
And that to me must have been a pretty big jump.
Yeah, it's true. It's funny. It kind of goes both ways. In that I think my personality is very introverted, and I've always worked better when I worked alone. I have a lot of difficulty working in a group. That's just something really hard for me to do, and it's always been that way. And I always just if I'm going to get anything done, I've got to find some little quiet corner and just work on my own little thing at my own pace. But working with a company is also, it's, even though I'm introverted, it's fun to. It's people. I still like people. It's not that I don't like people that I'm introverted. It's just that I can't be. I have to have some time to recharge from time to time. But I do like being around people. And so if I'm isolated and alone all of the time, well, that's still lonely. And it's, I don't know. I love the people that work. There's this one guy at Lightning named Adrian, and I don't want to. If I try to pronounce his last name, it's going to be terrible. He's Swiss, but I just feel like we're peas in a pod. Like I can talk to Adrian all day and all night about stuff, and like we've had conversations where I've almost come to tears because I felt like he understood what I was trying to do so well. Oftentimes people don't like. I'm like, I really want to break this down into something like a really simple problem, and they'll go, okay, yeah, I hear what you're saying, and then they'll come up with something much more complicated than it needs to be. And Adrian was one of the first person I'd ever talked to that when I said we need to come up with a really simple problem, he was like, I get you, and we came up with this incredibly simple thing, and I just felt like, oh, I found a kindred spirit, in a way that it just felt really good, and I don't know. It was very emotional. I'm getting emotional now. I mean, 13 years before that, I'd worked in a genetics lab, and I loved those guys. And we had a great time doing work, hanging out, being pals, and all those things. But none of them were like computer people. And I think fundamentally, I'm a computer person. So when Audrey and I had that conversation and we just connected at that level, I was like, oh, it's fun to be around computer people. It's these are my people. I mean, I do love the geneticists, but I think fundamentally it's cool to be around computer people.
Well, speaking of being around computer people, for the past week, you've been around at least a couple of them, I think. It's kind of drinking from the fire hose of how many computer people are around.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering about what your experience is like. And so for those who aren't familiar, we had a creator retreat through the agency that I started, Learn Media. And Bright Data came in and they sponsored the whole thing. So again, a shout out to them. But what has that experience been like? I think we had at the peak, maybe 16, 17 content creators around.
Yeah. Well, it was incredible because again, almost all these content creators also had day jobs, and I got to hear about what they do, what their problems are, what they're excited about. what's worked at work, what hasn't worked at work, what companies, everyone seems to have worked for almost every company. It's like everything was represented among the people that were here, and you could, these people, one company had this technology for databases and another company had another technology, and they were talking about how great it was to go from company A to company B. And just hearing about that and getting that context is something that I don't typically get on my own. And so it was sort of like being bathed in sort of the reality of what it means to be a data scientist or a data engineer, or I don't know. There's probably a million other names of the different types of people that were here. But as someone who I've spent a lot of time in academics, it was just great and enlightening and awesome to be around people that had nothing to do with academics and everything to do with sort of working in startups, working for major corporations, and everything in between, and sort of hearing what their pain points were, what made them happy, and sort of what they were doing and how they were doing it.
I agree so much. It seems like even when you're at your job, right? Mm-hmm. You're in that sort of bubble.
Yeah.
You're seeing the problems that you're running into with your technology stack, or the opportunities that are facing your current company. And when you're hanging around people that you don't necessarily work with, you get to see all the other cool things that are happening. And that's something that I've realized is I need to sort of get outside my own bubble more. And whether, it's like even within the content creation niche, right? Yeah. It's like, oh, we're making videos on YouTube. How are people doing it on LinkedIn? Like, I'm going to interview Zach Wilson in a little bit, and he's doing unbelievable things on LinkedIn that I wouldn't necessarily have thought of, or people who are streaming or on different platforms or whatever that might be. It just, in my mind, really pays to at least talk to people who are doing things differently in different places, because you get to learn from their experiences. You get to say, hey, maybe they're doing it better than we are. How can I change it? Or this content is doing well in this place. Maybe I should try it here. I used to think that I could figure it out on my own, mm-hmm. but the idea that you have to sort of search for things a little bit, or prod and poke around and meet different people and communicate with them has been revolutionary in any of the growth that I've had mainly with my work.
Yeah, no, it's been fantastic, and it's been fun because I get to see the forest of what everyone does, but through sort of individual conversations and one-on-ones, you also get to hear about the trees. And I don't know, I just love the exposure, and I'm already looking forward to doing this again, just so I can get some more of it.
Amazing. Were there any particular conversations or particular people that really stood out to you? Oh, and you won't offend anyone by not saying everyone.
I had great conversations with Shashank
Kalanithi, yep.
And I had a great conversation with Avery.
Avery Smith.
I'm blanking. Pretty much everyone I had great. Joe Reese, Matt, his collaborator.
Matt Hules.
Can't remember his last name. I'm terrible with names.
Too, so.
Alex. Pretty much Zach. Everyone that's been here has given me some great insight. Tina, had a great conversation with her. Great conversations with Nikki, and of course you. Thank you. It's just been wonderful. So yeah, the whole crew it's just been a fantastic experience for me.
Was there anything that surprised you about either the people or the actual event or any of those types of things?
Everything kind of surprised me, to be honest.
Yeah, but the first one, you don't have no expectations of everything.
Yeah, I'll be honest. About a week ago, I was convinced I was going to show up here in Salt Lake City and just be at the airport and go, now what do I do? I'd never done this before. It was everything about it was completely new, and and I just did. I had no idea what to expect, and so everything was just, you pulled up in this beautiful car and picked me up and whisked me away, and I was like, wow, this is awesome. Everything has kind of surprised me, and the fact that I don't know, it's just this is very different from what my normal life. We had great talks, we had great food, we went rock climbing today. We've done all kinds of stuff together that I would have never. I don't know. It was all great and pleasing in a way that was surprising in all the right ways.
Amazing. Well, that makes me really happy to
Yeah.
hear. Something that I found very interesting with trips like these is that everyone that comes, they're sort of on the same page, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's novel for everyone, but everyone's there to learn, and everyone's like very reliable and also very nice,
Mm-hmm.
which was a bit of a departure from a lot of the trips that I've been on with like my friends growing up and those types of things.
Yeah.
They don't listen to my podcast, so I'm not super. But it's nice where there is this alignment between personal growth, between learning, and between, I guess, like in some sense like a business objective for being here. We're all trying to improve the content that we create more value, and also potentially create more of a business for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is something that I'm always constantly surprised by, is just the quality of the group. They're knock on wood, between the two trips we've done, there's been absolutely no drama. There's been nothing like crazy that happened aside from the hot tub stream.
That was legendary. For those who don't know, we did a live stream from a hot tub.
Yes, on Shashank's channel. Yes, good old 5 dudes in a hot tub talking about data. What more could you ask for, really?
It was legendary.
Yeah. So it makes me really happy to hear that the experience was good for you. I think people would unanimously agree that the experience was better because you were there. You were there as well.
That's really nice.
Yeah. Honestly, Josh, those are all the questions I have. Do you have anything you want to add? I definitely want to add that I'm going to link the book in the description. Definitely check it out on Amazon. I have a signed copy, which I am unbelievably grateful for, and I've enjoyed reading it so much so far.
Oh, well, Ken, I just want to say thank you. When we first sort of started emailing, I don't even know how we started contacting online a couple of years ago, and when you had me on your show, I just feel like you've lifted me up and you've made me feel part of a community that I'm excited to be a part, that I feel really honored and very privileged and excited about being a part of a community that I never, as someone who came from a background in academics, never had an exposure to. And so with you not only did you introduce me to a ton of people, you invited me to spend 4 or 5 days with them, and all this. I don't know. I'm just so happy that you've been so generous and welcoming of me into this circle of friends, and it's just been a real pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that makes me so happy to hear. It's interesting. I just really enjoy bringing people together, meeting people, and like creating groups, and to me, that's something that it's like, where I live in Hawaii, there aren't that many people who I can talk about like a lot of the fun things that we talk about, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And a little selfishly, it's like, wow, I can meet people who I feel like are my people, who are interested in the same things, have similar vision and goals, and if I can find them and they're out there, why not bring them together and we can all do fun stuff together, and we all get this beautiful value of each other's experiences and time and also company. And so I'm just really happy that this has worked.
Yay. Yeah, it has worked.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, Josh. This was incredible.
Yep.
Also, thank you to Bright Data for sponsoring this trip and making it make financially possible for all of us that come out here as well.
Thank you.